internship rotation a couple weeks ago. So now I'm just finishing the master's portion, and then I will be eligible to be licensed in late January, early February. So today we're going to be talking about health supporting habits around holiday meals. First, just to tell you a little bit about myself and how I became to be a dietitian, or what experiences I've had so far. I kind of joke with people that I live a double life because I'm in the National Guard. So I have all this stuff I do civilian side, and then I go and play Army once a month. Before this program, I worked full time for the Army for about 3.5 years. And then with my internships, that just wasn't feasible. So I did my undergraduate at Missouri State University in Springfield, Missouri, and that was for communication disorders. And then I decided to join the Army and completely switch career paths. So I did all my initial duty training with the Army before I circled back and went back to school for dietetics. In that kind of gap time frame, I went to a few schools in the military and became a personal trainer in the civilian side, and that's kind of what opened the door to health and fitness as far as my career. I've always been passionate about health and fitness, so it was really fun to be able to coach soldiers who weren't passing our height weight regulations or their PT tests, and that's kind of the clientele I started working with in the field. I am also a master resiliency trainer in the Army and a victim advocate, all to say that I just really care about helping people, and I'm really passionate about habit change and building a life that leads towards longevity and chronic disease prevention. I also like powerlifting. I do have 2 kids, so my own fitness journey has kind of taken a pause to them. We have a son and a daughter. They're both still very little, so we have our hands full. And then after graduation, I specifically plan to work with pregnant and postpartum women. I have a self-paced course that I will be running, and then once I have my license, I'll be doing individual medical nutrition therapy with them. And this is my contact information if anyone wants to have that. I currently work under a dietitian that works with pediatric patients with autism and ADHD as well. So today we are going to be talking about health supporting habits around the holidays, and I've kind of made an agenda of different topics that came up when I thought about that title. So we're going to talk about proactive, active nutrition, which are terms that we use in the military, but basically saying proactive nutrition is building that foundation, because we can't really talk about eating around the holidays without, the majority of the rest of the year and how we're eating during that time. So we'll talk about eating patterns, physical activity, food safety practices, and then jumping more into those specific like holidays or day of planning. We'll talk about building a plate, planning for those meals, special considerations, and then just the mental component that comes with that. So starting with proactive nutrition, it's really important to remember that our overall dietary patterns are what is going to matter most versus individual food choices, especially around the holidays. I think that a lot of people get bogged down by, should I eat that piece of pie, or should I have a second plate? And if we take a step back and look at the bigger picture of things, our dietary pattern over weeks and months and the whole year is going to be most important than those small individual choices. So that's going to be kind of a theme that we talk about today. So what does a dietary pattern look like? Like, what can we do to build a dietary pattern? So one important thing is to be incorporating a variety of foods in all of the components. So a variety of protein sources, which are what's listed on the slide now, a variety of carbohydrate sources, that can be fruits, vegetables, grains, and then also a variety of fat sources. And those aren't extensive lists. Those are just some short lists that I came up with. So this is important for so many number of reasons, but one of those reasons is to create a diverse microbiome for our gut. So we have a functioning gut lining so we can have optimal nutrient absorption. We're going to get these from carbohydrates. We get probiotic and prebiotic foods from carbohydrate sources, and those are going to help create that diverse microbiome, the bacteria, and then also feed them so they're healthy. And then on the left side here, you can see a healthy gut lining. And then towards the right is going to be a damaged gut lining. And that's where you're going to hear the terms like a leaky gut or where the permeability of your gut is going to be damaged. And then you can start seeing some health risks or some diseases associated with that. Another important factor of our dietary patterns are where they come from. A lot of it is going to be our culture, our family dynamic, but a lot of people heavily rely on our dietary guidelines. So those are guidelines that are created every 5 years, kind of a little political, but for the majority of the population, they are a good starting point. So following a healthy dietary pattern at every stage of life. So these guidelines come out with this ginormous PDF file that describes in detail how you can do these at every stage of life. And it's a little overwhelming, but the bullet points under here kind of encompass most of the material. So it's meeting food group needs with nutrient-dense foods, beverages, and staying within a calorie limit. And that's really individual, staying within a calorie limit. That's going to, we'll see a slide here in a minute that will kind of give you a bigger picture of what all goes into all the factors of deciding like what your health or calorie limits should look like. A quick question about a term that's used on the slide here, nutrient-dense foods. Does anyone know what that means? Feel free to type an answer in the chat or unmute yourself. Do we have any ideas? Let me know if anything comes up in the chat.
Okay, someone says food rich in all nutrients.
Food rich in all nutrients, is that what you said?
Yes,
Okay. Did we have any other guesses?
that was it.
Okay. Food rich in all nutrients. That could fit the term. It's basically a idea or term that is describing a food that is by calorie or total calorie. Is it dense in nutrients or is it dense in energy? Meaning, let's say, a serving of French fries is going to be very energy dense. So for that serving, it's going to have a lot of calories or energy in it versus an avocado is going to be very nutrient dense. Well, actually, an avocado is pretty energy dense too because it's mostly fats, and fats has a lot of energy per calorie. So that was a bad example. Let me think of another one. An apple. Serving an apple or an avocado. The avocado is going to have a lot more calories or energy density to it versus an apple is going to have a lot more nutrients per serving, if that makes sense. So you can think of food on a spectrum, and it's not always the like, you know, the donut or fries is energy dense and like the fruits and vegetables are nutrient dense. Like I just pointed out, like avocado would be on that list. So it's talking about having nutrient dense foods. So being a majority of your foods. And then beverages, meaning not having sugar sweetened beverages, mostly having unsweetened beverages being your choice of fluid intake. The next column is customize and enjoy nutrient dense foods. There's that term again. Of your choice that reflect your personal preferences, your cultural traditions, your budgetary concerns, and then limit foods that have added sugar, saturated fat, sodium, and alcoholic beverages. So those are just some general guidelines of where to start when you're building your dietary pattern. It would be a disservice to talk about dietary patterns without mentioning our culture. So we have this huge weight-centric paradigm that we are living in, and it's starting to kind of change. I've seen a lot of changes, especially in the military. So I know the general population has to be maybe a little ahead of our military, I hope. But where do those come from? It comes from our beauty standards. We idolize thinness in our culture. We have this huge wellness culture that oftentimes bleeds into these times of the holidays, and I think puts pressure on a lot of people's decision making or what they should or shouldn't do around holiday meals because of this weight centric paradigm that we have. We have a huge industry of supplements that has really turned into like a weight loss industry of products. So it would be a really disservice not to mention how all of that impacts us when we're making these decisions. So another thing that impacts us if we're talking about big spectrum patterns is going to be weight cycling, and that is an impact of our weight-centric paradigm that we live in. But there are some risks that are associated with weight cycling, and that is that it creates a psychological and physiological change within our body, meaning it changes the way that our metabolism is working. So in order for us to use our calories more efficiently, our body is constantly going to change and create a new homeostasis if we're constantly trying to change and cycle through these like points of eating in a different pattern. So consistency is most important. Specifically, what happens with like adipose tissue is when we go through that initial weight loss stage, it's going to shrink those cells. But then when we change that dietary pattern and cycle back to what we were doing before, or even another spectrum of maybe overeating, it's going to double those cells and then they become larger. And it just is that cycle over and over again. And that makes it harder for people then to live in that smaller body that they're trying to gain. It also is going to change our satiety signals. So there's just a bunch of risks that happen with this pattern if we don't have this consistent pattern over time, and we're constantly changing that and going back and forth. These are some assumptions that we have about our weight-centric paradigm, and we can see it a lot in healthcare too. Just to say that body weight is directly associated with our health is inaccurate. So just being aware of these assumptions that are out there, and the Healthy Weight at Every Size is an organization that has actually been around since like 2004, and we're just now seeing shifts in healthcare in our society, hopefully for the better. And this is a picture I was referencing earlier. So the red arrow is pointing to weight, and everything else is what helps determine our health. So only 22% is really these biological, weight, height, all of those things. And then everything else is going to be our behaviors, our physical environment, the medical care we have, and social circumstances. So there's a lot that play into our health, and our dietary pattern is going to be so much more important than I think what most people put emphasis on. So another factor when thinking about health habits and holidays is going to be food safety concerns. I know specifically in my family too, and I don't think we have to be the odd ducks, is a lot of people cook all this food and then we keep it out all day and we're just going back and lingering and eating in the kitchen all day, which isn't a bad thing to be, grazing on the food. But the thing to keep in mind is the food at risk to being contaminated? So just some practices to keep in mind during the holidays. They may be self-explanatory, but I thought it would be nice as a reminder to do proper hand washing and washing your produce, just simply rinsing it with cold water, unless it has like a harder out shell, like a cucumber could use like a scrubbing tool, but otherwise just rinsing with water is sufficient. keeping raw meat separated from ready-to-eat foods, using separate cutting boards. And then the cooking time and temperatures is going to be what I want to highlight. And keeping a cooking thermometer is a really handy tool, especially when you're cooking for a large group of people. And then this danger zone. So keeping food out for the 2 hour mark and beyond is going to be where we're at risk for foodborne illness. And I think my family specifically has this survivor bias where they, have been doing it for 20 years and I've never gotten sick. Well, that's great because I don't want it to be this year that I walk away with food poisoning. But it's just something to be aware of. Refrigerating leftovers and just keeping it to that temperature of 165 degrees if it's going to be left out. So just a reminder about food safety practices. I just want to take a pause here. Do we have any questions or comments on anything that we've covered so far?
Nothing yet.
Okay, perfect. I feel like I always talk a lot faster than I plan on, so I just wanted to take a second. So another important factor when we're talking about big picture of what matters for holidays or just our dietary patterns is going to be physical activity. This could be an obstacle in itself if we don't have a established routine, but then also holiday shopping and family get-togethers really put kind of a fork in that plan. But if we can try to keep a regular schedule as much as possible, even if it's just 1 or 2 days a week that we're having movement in, it will make a big difference. Incorporating walking after large meals, it can help aid in digestion so we don't just lay around feeling awful about all of the food that we enjoyed with our families. And it can be an opportunity to even connect with your family too. If you guys want to incorporate large walks after your large meals, and even if it's chilly, it can just be an opportunity for you guys to have conversation that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have. We don't want to think about eating the calories and then burning it off, but if we can think about like strategically having meals when you do have a bigger workout planned, it can be, your carb load or giving you all of that energy for an intense workout, or even a personal record. So we can use that big meal or more calories than you're typically eating to our benefit. And these are just some ideas if you don't already have a good physical exercise routine of things that you can try, and just finding something that you really like is going to be most important. I thought an idea too was incorporating games into your holiday plans. That would be a great way to increase movement and connection again with your family. So you could play like a game of basketball, or I don't know, if it's cold inside, you can get what is that? Twister. That would probably be a fun one to play with people. So just keeping in mind that physical activity is important and finding a way to do that with your family, or just also keep it in your individual routine as we come into the holiday season. So we're going to talk about now kind of more focused in on the day of holiday planning. All of the other things that we've hit so far are kind of preparation or bigger picture ways of thinking about your pattern before the holidays get here. Just pretend like that is a whole word and not all weird like it is. But basically, you can think of a plate if you're going to have a snack or a meal of having these components to it. And this is going to help you stay satiated. So you're not going to be hungry like an hour later if you have these components in your snacks and meals. So if you're just having a smaller snack, let's say you're waiting for the food to get done, or it's like a few hours still before you guys are planning to eat. If you have a vegetable, fruit, grain, and protein, whether that be small, but just making your snack plate in this portion size will help with your satiety and staying full longer, and then also just getting a well-balanced snack. And then if you look at the meal plate, is kind of the same concept, but structured a little differently. So making half your plate fruits and vegetables, having a fourth be the protein source, and a fourth being the starch. So if we think about this in holiday meals, let's think like Thanksgiving foods. The half of the plate may be we have like green bean casserole at my family, or maybe some like honey roasted carrots would be on the left-hand side, and maybe someone made a salad too. So you could put those three things on that half of the plate. And then you would have the fourth of the plate be the turkey, and then the fourth of the plate be probably like mashed potatoes or um, a roll. And that would be a good way to make your plate to where you would have all the components, a variety of the foods, you would feel satiated, and have your holiday meal that way. So more tips or do's and don'ts. So let's start with the do column. Helping plan the holiday meal. A lot of times, maybe it's left out. I think it's easier maybe during Thanksgiving, I feel like, to have the vegetables or fruits, but I think sometimes it might not be in your like family dynamic to have a lot of fruit or vegetable dishes. So just helping plan, like maybe starting a new tradition to incorporating new foods that have more of those components instead of having like the heavier dishes that are more of the carbs and proteins, just to keep that variety there, or even volunteering to bring those dishes to your family meals to have. Building your plate. So we talked about components in the last slide, but also building your plate to your taste preferences too. So not restricting anything on your plate, whether that be like a texture that you're craving, or a taste that you're craving, like your pie, like having all of that on your plate so you're not restricting yourself and making you feel guilt in any way. And you're gonna be like completely satiated after that meal on a hunger level, but also on like a craving level. Remembering, like we've talked about, the overall dietary patterns are going to matter most. And just being curious where your thoughts are manifesting from. So, if we've done all of the things we've talked about thus far, we've planned out and had kind of a little sit down with ourselves, like, what does my dietary pattern look like going into the holidays without the stress of the holiday? And is it a variety of foods? And is it energy dense foods? And then you came to the holiday, you've made balanced plates, and you've eaten everything that you feel like you have been craving and wanted, and you're still having some sort of stress or pressure around it. Really being curious where those thoughts are manifesting from instead of putting guilt on yourself, which is the first one in the don't column. We don't also want to restrict calories before these meals or after these meals. We just want to go right back to our dietary pattern, whatever that is, and just if we have like our normal dietary pattern and then one day difference and then we just go back to normal, it's not going to have that cycle that we talked about before. And then we also talked about not over exercising to burn those calories off necessarily, but just keeping that normal movement in our routines. And then maybe even incorporating some games or movement in with your family to make it more of a holiday connection piece. Some other special considerations that we can talk about are kids. If you have kids during the holidays, that can be extra stressful. You're probably going to houses that aren't necessarily childproof if they're little kids, or they're just going to be extra rambunctious because they're going to be excited about things. And maybe you have a picky eater, and that can be really challenging around the holidays. Again, it's going to be kind of about pressure and expectation. So I wouldn't expect any new foods to be tried during a holiday. It might be too stressful for them. Or even depending on the child, you could bring a special meal for them so they don't feel, ostracized or forced to try something that's there. You could maybe try one small new food and not have any pressure for them to actually eat it it could just be on their plate. Maybe they could even smell the food, and that could be their introduction to it. Just keeping in mind allergies, which I'm sure if you have a kid with allergies, you're kind of a pro at that by now, but just another special consideration. And then neurodivergence. Holidays can be so many people in small areas, and it can be very sensory overload just for a neurotypical person. So just keeping in mind or having that expectation, if you have a neurodivergent kid, you might just need some extra space, like think about wearing headphones or earplugs to kind of muffle that noise. Or again, with the food sensitivities or the different texture sensitivities, just being aware and having a game plan going into those days for those things. And then pregnancy, as we talked about those food safety practices earlier, it's going to be really important for someone that is pregnant to follow those maybe even more closely than a normal person that's not pregnant would, because they're going to be at a higher risk if they develop that foodborne illness to become more ill and obviously put the baby at danger. So it's just really important to remember during the holidays, if you are pregnant, to really be wary of how long the food has been sitting out. Sometimes, often, you might veer away from the fruits and vegetable trays because those are usually left out the longest, and could be more susceptible to having a foodborne illness. And you might also think about the frequency that you're going to want to eat. Sometimes it takes a while for food to be done, so you might want to bring some snacks of your own, and just being aware of your energy levels. So that was a lot of information, and I think I don't know how long I've been talking, but I feel like it was really fast. So what questions or comments does anyone have? I would love to hear any feedback. If you don't have any questions on what you liked or what you thought could have been expanded on.